Hello, everybody. This is Kubernetes Workgroup Device Management Meeting for March 3rd, 4th, 2025. And all right, let's get started. Laura, you've got the first item on the agenda. There's really only two items. Laura has an item, and then I wanted to take some time and review the board and let anybody open up to any questions about reviews that are needed or things. So anyway, Laura, you go ahead and take.
Thanks. Yeah, so I want to talk about a issue. Let's see. Let's go back here. Yeah, this issue, which Sergey had opened a while ago, and I've been kind of looking at, and now I'm getting more serious about looking at, about the kubelet plugin infrastructure on the kubelet side, its reliability and how that intersects with the DRA kubelet plugin and DRA drivers, and overall what that means for improving either the kubelet side or our documentation or best practices about how drivers or the kubelet plugin should be implemented, particularly for DRA's GA, and to make sure that that goes smoothly, because that was identified as a graduation criteria, to make sure that the kubelet plugin reliability addresses some of these issues that already exist or are already known to possibly exist. So Sergey opened this issue a while ago, and for people who have been following you probably also remember this doc that Sergey wrote as well, which has more like organized by category, different types of failure modes or issues that had been speculated. What I am working on right now is to try and answer some of these, especially from the perspective of the kubelet side and the interaction between kubelet and the kubelet plugin. To do that, I kind of need to be an expert on the kubelet plugin framework. So that's step one, because I'm kind of new to it. But I just wanted to share a little bit about this Scratch doc, which I linked into the agenda, which is pulling together some of the stuff that I'm diving into from reading the code, some of the prior talks that have been given by some of the folks here, relating to the issues that were brought up in that this doc here. And then I'm building out this sequence diagram to try and keep it all straight. I think for people who have some experience with the device, with either device plugin or with the DRA kubelet plugin, you probably already know this, but FYI, there is already or how to say, there's interactions between all of these components during particularly the startup and registration process, which is what I'm most interested in, because the failure modes that I'm trying to follow are what happens if it takes a long time for the kubelet plugin to be registered, what happens if the driver on the other side of that kubelet plugin crashes, what happens if like the CDI templates aren't ready yet, like what order are things supposed to be happening, what happens if kubelet restarts. So that's kind of like the startup and registration is the time that I'm really interested in. Basically, I'm trying to dig down into these different components, including again, I think people who have made a driver know, but the driver itself, which I'm using the DRA example plugin as kind of like the reference for that, that goes on to interact with the dynamic resource allocation kubelet plugin, which is in the Kubernetes repo, which does a lot of, I think this was something that used to be work that individual drivers needed to implement, but covers a lot of boilerplate that needs to be done instead in kind of like a generic way. And then this actually handles the registration to kubelet so that kubelet knows that this plugin even exists, which then by extension means that it even knows that these drivers exist. In the case of DRA, there's also the situation that the API server is involved potentially earlier on than, for example, device plugin. There are certain CRDs that need to exist, of course, but then also it's part of the role of the driver to instantiate some claim objects. And there's also an interaction that I haven't dug into that much on the container runtime side about actually registering the CDI plugin and initializing those. So this is kind of like this landscape of what I'm trying to take a look at. And I welcome anybody who has some experience with this or some thoughts about this to talk to me. I'll mention something else in a second, but Patrick, do you want to hop in?
Well, I don't want to interrupt, but I have a few comments, so
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, yeah.
Good.
Let me say maybe just one more thing, which is that besides sort of like detailing better or following more closely how all of these components interact with each other today, there's sort of a concrete set of starter like end-to-end tests that Sergey started on. I think there's also a direction regarding like either I guess related to those same node tests to create some tests that exercise some of these failure modes over here. For example, all kubelet restarting or a plugin crashing or whatever, so that we can get some empirical data about what those delays are in real time in addition to the timeouts that already exist. And then lastly, as I'm working on this, I'm just going to keep coming back and basically bring these questions or some proposals of what should be changing in Kubelet or the Kubelet plugin manager framework as necessary, and implement those. So, all right, Patrick, what's up?
Yeah. Okay. Back to your previous slide. One comment for me: there isn't really a CDI plugin for container runtimes. They have the necessary code built in. What is an interesting interaction here is how that code notices that CDI files have been created.
Yes, I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically a file system watch. So the container runtimes, they have a cache of known CDI files, and they use the helper code from the CDI project to be informed if new files get created. And yeah, you're right, that is a potential risk that a new file is created and the plugin doesn't know about it yet. And it's absolutely worthwhile to look at how reliable that is at the moment. That's one comment.
Yeah.
The other is that a lot of what you are showing here is already in progress or has enhancements pending. I posted 2 links. One is work that Ed Bartosz from Intel has been doing on detecting stale gRPC connections. So the case where either the kubelet or more likely the plugin terminates, how does the kubelet even know about that? It currently doesn't, because a gRPC connection, even though it's done over the Unix domain socket, is kind of stateless. So you can intermediate, or you can have you can have a connection to a plugin that is not currently running, and you don't get any error from gRPC until you start using it.
Right.
So the registration typically is a one-time thing. The plugin is registered, and then the kubelet doesn't notice when the plugin goes away. And that applies to all plugins.
Yeah.
So Ed has been doing some work to regularly ping the registration server. That's his that's the issue. And there is a corresponding PR from Ed already about detecting this and then unregistering basically a dead plugin, so that the kubelet then can take corresponding action. In the case of DRA, the corresponding action if a plugin goes away is to delete resource slices, because we don't want new pods to be scheduled onto a node where the plugin is gone. if they were scheduled, we would end up with pods that can't run because they can't run without the plugin. That's one piece of a puzzle. But the other one is what I have called seamless driver upgrades. I think I linked to the PR. That is changing how, mostly about changing best practices and some support that needs to go into kubelet to enable that. So a daemon set, most of the time right now, because kubelet traditionally hasn't supported anything else, is to have one instance of the container, the plugin running at the same time in a node. And to upgrade, you need to kill the pod. You need to kill the pod, which then eventually will unregister it because in a clean shutdown, it will also remove its Unix domain socket. Then the new pod starts and it registers again. That's the current process that most of the plugins, all plugins use, because as I said, there was a lengthy discussion either in this, I think I linked to it in my PR, but there was another PR in our backlog about taking over Unix domain socket where we discussed a lot of things. So my PR actually has an update to the design document for the plugin watcher. That's this readme.md file where I'm explaining a lot of the existing design constraints and how I'm proposing to change it. With what I'm proposing, we can enable the max search feature in a daemon set and allow 2 pods to run at the same time for the same driver name. And with additional support in kubelet, that is truly seamless. We don't need to delete resource slices because the kubelet will always have one working plugin instance that it can talk to. But that goes together with changes in the plugin side, because then it also needs to be aware that it's not the only instance running on a node. So there are ripple effects on how to deploy the things, how to handle certain things. What I plan to do is to update the generic helper to cover those cases, and then we need to figure out how to deploy that in practice. That's one open that I have in my PR, where I was hoping to get feedback from SIG-Node, but haven't heard anything yet. That is about deploying the right version of your DRA driver to nodes where kubelet supports such a rolling update. Because it also fails if the plugin assumes that kubelet supports a rolling update when an old kubelet doesn't. There is another failure mode in the README about that. It just fails in different ways. So the plugin basically needs to have some kind of node selector, ideally, where we can say, okay, this version of my driver with rolling update goes onto nodes which support rolling updates with max search larger than larger than 0. And for traditional clusters with older kubelet, we need to have another driver daemon set variant where it's doing updates the traditional way. So that's currently where we are, and it's work in progress. Well, it's pending review feedback from SIG-Node, which I haven't gotten. And if I had that, I would continue with that PR to finish also the helper code part.
Okay,
the
cool. Yeah.
The kubelet enhancement itself, I think, is done. The open question is how to deploy it. And if we agree on how to deploy it to make the helper code support that mode.
Abhishek?
Yeah, so there's this question. I heard max search capability inside daemon set. So for this feature to be implemented, we have to change the daemon set controller?
No, the daemon set controller supports it already. Okay. It's just that no one, to the best of my knowledge, really uses it, because or at least not for kubelet plugins, because kubelet itself doesn't support this mode well enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay,
So
cool.
can go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, just so I think some of the things that you mentioned definitely address some of these. It sounds like there is like a kind of connection point with the rest of Signode and getting some more feedback on those things and making sure that that's the way forward we want to do on the kubelet side, that I can take a look at. I think there's some other questions, at least in here, regarding, and I don't know if this is addressed in what you propose as well, but regarding some of the timeouts or some of the process that the even existing plugin manager or plugin watcher operates, that I think is still open question from the node side. And then I can also take a look at cross-reference some of these things with your proposal and see which other ones may have not been addressed, and maybe come back and see how we think about those or what we think about those, if it's within the purview of this working group to make a suggestion or take that to Signode. John, what's up?
Well, I think it's definitely fixing stuff is within our purview. We don't need any, I mean, Signode will approve the code. We're happy to talk to them. They're obviously a big sponsor of this working group. So the
I guess I
question is,
mean the decision point. Like, I think there's some of these things that we have to make this proposal, get this feedback, and make this decision, right? That's what,
okay,
that's what
Yeah, yeah,
Patrick is waiting for. So I think that process for some of these other things may also have not been started.
so what I guess what I would like to ask is for somebody to take point on this and kind of like Ed's working on things, Patrick's working on
Right.
things, you're working on things, there's probably other folks working on things. Like, I want to make sure we're not duplicating effort and that everybody's making sure that whatever they're doing doesn't, conflict with other people are doing. So I don't know if somebody can take point and like we can collect a series of issues that we think are, I mean, either through a doc or through a thread on Slack or through issues on the board. I don't know how we want to organize it, but like make sure we're coordinating and coming up with a cohesive plan, because by 134, we want to have a certain set of things. We want to identify the things that are critical to get done for 134, which is when we want a GA. And we want to have that punch list then well-defined and be executing on it. So that's my kind of vague, can somebody take this on and make sure it happens? That would be
Yeah,
my,
like for example, from my perspective, I came at this from this doc, but I think some other people may have come at it from another side. I don't know if this is something like this list of things is something that we even are all unified on, of the people who are working on it. So maybe at minimum we can start a Slack thread about that and tag everybody in and make sure of that at minimum.
I think it would be great if Laura could take point on this and keep the things connected, make sure that we don't forget about something, and most of all, ping people and get reactions, because that right now I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think I'll definitely, as mentioned before, kind of cross-reference. Again, I'm kind of starting from this doc, so if I don't know, if there's some other source of like this kind of level of like what we think is wrong or what the problem space is, then let me know. But I'm kind of starting from here, and if I can at least take the step of cross-reference this with what you have just shared with me is in progress and see what holes are missing, and then also do an extra bump on the trying to get the kubelet plugin proposal that you've already made, get some more feedback from Signode, then I think that we have a concrete next step. Sergey, hello. You have a hand.
I'm driving, so please bear with me and
Okay,
let
yeah.
me know if I'm not audible. I can contact later. So I also agree with Patrick. Somebody taking a point on like centralizing all the knowledge and trying to like come up with some artifact, like maybe extended document about failure modes and stuff like that. It'll be great. We also would be it will be great to have some principles. Like one of the principles should be that all the errors should be recoverable without the need to SSH to the node and do some like manual intervention. Like if like a couple examples right now is like if a DRA plugin is gone, then we literally cannot terminate the pod any way gracefully because it will stuck into like trying to unallocate devices. And we need to make sure that it is recoverable. So like if you force delete the pod, it will work all right, and it wouldn't break any things like it will. I don't know like what will happen with the resource slices that were assigned to this pod, but something like we need to think of how to recover from all those device failure from failure modes. Like another failure mode is like we don't have a pod admission now, and if DRA plugin was present before, but then pod start creating a sandbox, and by that time there is no DRA driver any longer. Like it's also some like infinite crash loop that for customers really hard to recognize as a crash loop because like
Right.
like it's not, it won't be super clear
Yeah.
what happened. And yeah, it's fine to have this crash loop. Like we cannot prevent failures in this case. Like it just happens that like DRA is no longer there, but it should be recoverable. So like I think recoverability without like detection of what happened and recoverability would be two very important points for end users.
Yeah. Well, the recoverability should be normally to bring back the DRA plugin. Because that is recoverable. It will connect again and it will retry, and eventually it will continue with what was failing before. Recovering in an abnormal way by not bringing back the DRA driver, yeah, well, we can think about that, but that really turns into how to force delete things, and that's not what people should be doing.
Well, yeah, it's also, right, we have this other issue we've talked about in the past when a pod gets assigned to a node, but actually can't run on the node, we don't have a way to put it back in the queue and you know, right? Like, so essentially a state of the world changed between scheduling the pod, binding it to that node, and actual actuation by the kubelet. The state of the world changed, the thing no longer fits. And so theoretically, it should get booted back out completely, go back through scheduling, and it won't land on that node because theoretically the scheduler now knows that it wouldn't fit. But I think that's a more general problem we have, right, in Kubernetes. So if we can at least document it, and then, like Sergey said, be prepared to do something longer term about it. But it's not unique to this, I guess, is my point.
That's a general problem. Something that we can do short term is there is another issue about permanent failures in the DRA plugin. Like, for example, the device that has been allocated is gone. We can't reschedule. That is a general architecture decision with kubelet and would need a lot more work to fix. But we could say this pod has failed permanently and just make sure that it is treated as failed, and then it will get deleted eventually by an admin by the application controller, and a new one will get created as a replacement. That is something that we could be doing in the short term.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, all right, so Laura, it sounds like you're good with taking point on this.
Yeah, it
Try
also
to
sounds like
pull everybody together and make a plan.
yeah, it also sounds like there's one other point kind of in here, which I'm hearing, which is about there's like the, you know, make everything recoverable and magic, etc. And then there's also the transparency, I guess, to the end user of like where in the process something got stuck, I guess. And I'm kind of interested, maybe not now, but in general, like how much transparency for like the average end user in the like behaviors regarding like, is my pod stuck here because, like, for example, this last one, I can't reschedule, and as you're basically stuck in some sort of crash loop because the device can't be allocated and never will be allocated. So is there some like variations, I guess, or some principles about how that messaging should be to the end user beyond like kind of like what has evolved thus far? And does that feel like an important aspect of this sort of reliability project,
I
or
think
less
it's
so?
important to understand how troubleshooting is done.
Yeah.
And I think it relates to recoverability. Ideally, if a thing recovers automatically, you don't need to do any troubleshooting.
Yeah.
If it doesn't recover automatically, but you need to troubleshoot it and then you need to recover. I think it's part of the story. Yes, 100%. Like, I think that what will come out of the analysis is, and the principles and all of this is,
Yeah.
here's the thing we need to do for 134. Here's the things that we need that are broader problems that we need the broader Signode community to agree on how to solve, and might take longer. But like, let's get a clear. We've got a good start with the documents Sergey's put together and the documents you're putting together and the issues that other people have created. But like, let's just try and create a little organized plan.
Right, it's a
for
little
delivery.
fragmented. I understand.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's a little fragmented. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One thing I'd like to
Yeah.
add here, that like this document actually describes the problem as a DRA, and it could make a like wrong assumption that it's like unique to DRA, but it's not. Like, it's common problem for at least CSI and device plugins as well.
Yeah.
And the solution should actually reflect that. And the document, if that will be prepared, should also describe it as a common problem with plugins.
The problem with that is that we then start to boil the ocean. If we can solve it for DRA, it already would be a good step forward. If we try to do the same at the same time also for traditional device plugins, we have a lot more work at our hands. It may not work for existing device plugins unless those get changed. So we increase the risk that we are not doing anything useful in the near future if we try to do too much at once. And we are not wrong but we need to be careful about where we put our efforts and what we focus on first.
Yeah, that's correct. But I'm not proposing to solve the problem like at once at all places. We should describe it, like design it, and then solve like the way we prefer.
I will mention that at least this doc I know is derivative of a couple different conversations that was broader, and at this point has gotten at least a little bit more narrow to the DRA case. I do think maybe wherever we land on sort of the final document that kind of like describes the effort of this project, we can be a little bit more clear. And I think this also goes to some stuff that John was saying too, of like, what are the things that are like a general Kubernetes problem, I guess? What are the things that are like a really general plugin problem that's also a problem for all the other plugins? And what is something that actually blocks DRA for GA, I guess, and that
Bingo, yeah.
and
That's
where's the
good.
overlap, I guess, between
Yeah.
like those things? Yeah.
We shouldn't be blocking DRA's GA for a problem that is a general Kubernetes problem or a device plugin problem that we can't fix so easily. So,
but I'll definitely take that as a point, Ed, to like try and make the distinction of when kind of like what things that have been identified in both this or throughout this process, like which category those kind of fit into. And then I think that also makes it more possible for us to carry on that work either outside the context of like a DRA milestone or whatnot. Jack, what's up?
Yeah, I kind of like Francesco's comments in the chat. So it's a good call out, and I feel like DRA is a great forcing function to give us momentum to address some of these long-standing issues. We talked about sort of pod preemption earlier. There's a bunch of general problems. I think it's super for best results. We have to solve them for DRA, but I think as we solve them for DRA, as we evaluate designs and all that kind of thing, we can think about like what's the long-term path. Like let's say we solve this in an optimal way for DRA, and then at some point Kubernetes solves it in the general way. Is there a path forward for adopting the general way for DRA? So those kinds of questions, almost like forward compatibility questions, are I think useful to ask ourselves. But I do think it's super important that we just feel like we're tackling DRA issues and we're forging the trail for instances of solving problems that may be generalizable in the future.
Okay, awesome. Anything else, Laura?
No, just you know, advertising myself. I'm interested in this thing. Talk to me if you're interested in this thing. And it sounds like there isn't like a true home base for this thing right now. So I will tell you where home base is for
Perfect.
this project, and you will follow me. Great.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, next item, the next, okay, sorry, there's something on that paragraph. Just reviewing the board, I figured it's a good idea, and if anybody has specific call outs, like before we even look at the board, I can tell you the prioritized list implementation is done, and a number of us have reviewed it. It needs the approvals from the right people. So I think that's some folks in SIG scheduling, and probably Signode and maybe some other places. So I think Tim reviewed it once for API review, and hopefully he'll be getting back to it in the next day or two, I hope. I'll try and ping him about that. But other than that, let me bring it up. I can share.
Yeah, speaking of caps, there is also work on admin controlled attributes where we have one naming discussion going on. I think it's actually under review, the first PR from John. The question there is a new top level type that admins can use to modify slices on the fly. Should we call that resource slice patch, resource slice override, resource slice overlay? This is a free for all. Basically, we are collecting opinions, and eventually we will need to get an API reviewer to acknowledge our change. But if we as a team can agree on something and it has a clear preference from most people, then we could go ahead and update the PR, perhaps.
Is that in here in this implementation one?
Yes, it is.
So what, unless the semantics are exactly like patch semantics, I don't think we should call it patch.
Yeah.
And
Scroll
so
down,
overlay.
there's one thread with a few options. Should be fairly prominent if you just scroll down, because it's the longest one, I think. But it might be hidden. Thanks. No, there it is.
Yeah, it might get.
No, you just scroll past it.
Yep. Okay.
So,
this
yeah,
one.
that's the one.
Yeah.
As I said in my last comment, I like resource slice overlay best at the moment, because it is kind of replacing some aspects of the vendor provided resource slice with new values. Yeah, I see that Runal also said that he likes that, so we have 2 votes in favor of it already.
Yeah, overlay works for me. I mean, overlay, I think Jack's comment applies both to overlay and override. It's the over part of that makes it look like it's, but I think you can be, I don't think that's a blocker personally for the name. I think override or overlay works.
Actually, I think overlay doesn't have that connotation, at least for me. It just puts something on top of it, which is exactly what the type does. Override is, I don't know, well, to me, a bit more specific, like really replacing specific attributes. But yeah, perhaps that's just.
I mean, overlay sounds a little bit more like it's just additive to me than override, but I think it's kind of, I think these are very subtle.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
I think aren't overlay file systems something that people talk about? And those can add files, remove files, and change content. So it would be similar to do overlay file systems.
I still need me back to my rational clear case days. For those of you who are of a certain age, you know what the hell I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, override or overlay makes sense to me. Probably if I had to pick one, I would go with overlay. So I'll say that. Or to pick one. I have to pick one, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, we are still left
Not
guessing.
to have both.
Yeah. Okay. The question is whether we want to get a formal API reviewer to confirm our choice before we ask John to change the entire PR, because that's what it boils. Well, it's mostly search and replace, perhaps, but some of it isn't, and it touches multiple commits. So changing the type name is a fairly heavyweight thing that we shouldn't do lightly. But it sounds like we are confident enough that we might do it now.
I mean, I think we can at least say, hey, Tim, do you hate this name?
Yeah, if we can get his, I tried
Gives it Tim's-
already on Slack on a private chat we have
He's
that we
really
have
busy,
going
yeah.
about potential API reviewers, and so far he hasn't commented, and no one else has either. I'm a bit in a pickle because
let me talk to him, because I have time with him at some point, I think this week.
Yeah,
So
that may help.
or next week, if not this week. So
my challenge right now still is that I'm kind of looking for, or I'm planning to become an API reviewer, but we have a gentleman's agreement that I shouldn't be the shadow API reviewer on DRA caps, in particularly not on caps that I wrote myself. That doesn't make sense at all. So we still need some other neutral opinion here for someone who's perhaps not as close to DRA as we all are.
I mean, I think, let me discuss it with Tim and see whether he thinks we need to bring somebody else other than him in, or he'll be able to make himself available enough, because he's got a lot going on.
He was trying to get other people engaged, but so far with mixed results. I think some of the people who volunteered haven't done anything or have not responded. Others have done something, but we just need to see.
Okay. All right. So then, any others people want to call out? So we called out. So is this ready for review now? I think last 2 weeks ago, you said it wasn't quite there.
For the API review, I think it is, except for this name thing. I started looking at some of the implementation parts, and those also should be ready. I just haven't checked the details. So I think it's ready.
Awesome. And then the other one, as I said,
if you scroll down because
it's merged, it should be moved to top.
Yes, that could be merged, but that was just merged today, so I haven't done
it
yet.
Does it move? I thought it moved it automatically, but okay.
No, it doesn't. Perhaps we could, but I sometimes wonder whether it makes sense to just do one last check whether it's really done, because sometimes people have accidentally put fixes into their PR comment, and I've seen PRs on issues getting closed without them really being solved. So I think I prefer to have a last look at it before it disappears.
Yeah. No,
and I usually do that. I just haven't done that for this one.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
sorry, you're only seeing you're not seeing. Okay. So I'm taking the ones that I think are especially to call out. I know they're here, but and putting them in the doc too. So this one you said is ready. We just talked about that. Rita, this one, what's the status here? Is Rita here?
Yeah, this one is ready for another round of review.
Okay.
Yeah, I've added everything, addressed all the comments, so please review. Yeah.
Okay. All right. If it ends up just being that same column, then I look like an idiot, but okay. This one, are we waiting on anything here? Patrick, we still need, who needs to approve this? Does this just need to be driven to approval, or what's the deal? You're on mute, Patrick.
This is the one we talked about earlier. That is kind of pending on SIG-Node feedback, how complete they want this to be.
So
And depending on
Sergey, can
that,
you-
I want to do further work on the helper code. So the thing that is in the PR right now is complete. It just might turn out that we want to do additional work depending on the initial review.
Okay, so who do we need? Is that Sergey? Who do we need? Runal? Who do we need to
Sergey
look at?
has time for it. That would be perfect because he also started that doc about, well, as we said, about the DRA infrastructure, plugin reliability, and so on.
So I don't know if Sergey's able to. He was driving, I guess. But if he's there,
You can mention me on an issue. I will take a look. Thank you.
This is closed. Anybody know what this is?
Yeah. I wanted at some point, I have an issue open where I'm basically describing that the helper code should encourage DRA drivers to follow best practices. And what I had proposed in the issue was to change the Go interface, or to provide a Go interface that DRA drivers need to implement, where, for example, some validation step is explicitly called out as something that the DRA driver author must implement. They currently can and should be doing it as part of their node prepare resources implementation, but it might not be obvious that we need to do this. It's basically just part of a design, but it's not enforced by the Go interface. And the idea was that if we change our helper code so that there are certain things that have to be implemented by a DRA driver because it's part of the if it's part of the interface, then we can basically force the DRA driver developers to do the things that they might otherwise might miss. But this PR was picked up by a junior contributor, and it turns out that there were multiple iterations where he was just proposing things that didn't work. I told him how to change them, and eventually we decided to close this issue. To close the PR. The issue is still open.
Okay.
And I want to combine that with the seamless upgrade. So basically, there will be one, perhaps even just one PR where the whole helper code gets updated and the array drivers who update to the recent helper code then need to be implemented differently.
Okay, so there's still an issue for that, and okay,
Yes.
thank you. Sounds like you're on top of that. This one we already talked about.
This device manager takeover for device plugins. That is the PR that started a lot of the discussions on the implementation side for plugin handling and socket handling. It was trying to do that, I think, for device plugins, but we kept it here because the working group is about kind of also device plugins.
Sure.
I don't think it solves anything for DRA, but a lot of the discussions that we had there are applicable to what Laura is now analyzing. I don't think it's ready for merging,
Okay.
but people who are
Does it
interested
need
in
review from anybody specific or?
so review from anyone who is planning to enhance Kubelet in that space, because it does have some value. It does have some relevant ideas and relevant discussions. So at least people should have seen it.
I do that. And Laura at least can take a look.
Yeah.
And do you need, is it, once it's ready for like, it looks like Sergey's mentioned here, I don't know if he's looked at it, but if once it's ready for like SIG node approval, probably we should have.
The problem with this PR is that it just changed for code. No design discussions, nothing. It just said, here's the change, merge it, and everyone will be happy. That made it a bit hard to figure out what problem it was solving, under which circumstances it was supposed to be used. And the README update that I have in my PR is pretty much filling that gap. It's explaining the race conditions that can occur. So looking at my PR first and then looking at the other one makes a bit more sense, even though the history is the other way around, I think.
You're saying that the proposal that implements is effectively in your
I know he's doing device plugins. I'm doing DRA.
Oh,
but
I
the
see. Okay,
problem
okay.
is the same, and my PR has a longer update to the README of the plugin manager that explains what I'm changing, why I'm changing it, and why I'm changing it the way that I'm doing in my code. Whereas this other PR just has code changes.
Right.
It doesn't have instructions for the array driver or for plugin authors. It just changes the code, and you have to reverse engineer how it's supposed to be used.
As far as I remember, it changes another code. It doesn't touch the plugin manager. It changes the code that belongs only and works only for device plugins.
Yeah, but I think the same is true for mine. It's really the thing is the plugin manager has plugins. CSI, device plugin, and DRA are all kind of different backends for the plugin manager. And those different backends behave differently or can behave differently how they handle a plugin. That's why we have potentially different behavior, but potentially also isolation. So we can do something differently for DRA plugins and not touch device plugins. So it has pros and cons.
Okay, well, I think that fits into the
Sorry.
that part too.
There are two ways device plugins actually operate. So they have their own registration. So and that code is actually changed by this PR as far as I remember, but I could be wrong here. So it's not about plugin manager, and device plugins can be registered two ways, and that code changes the another way, not plugin manager way, but the unique way that is used by only device plugins.
I see.
Okay.
Thanks for the context, y'all.
Yeah, thank you. Next one. Scope validating emission policy and DRA EDE test more narrowly.
This is on hold because the work that Rita is doing pretty much replaces this. So we agreed to not merge it yet.
Oh, this is because we are
probably
using validation. Okay,
yeah.
admission policy for admin access before.
So we should change to the built-in approach and then see whether we still need this one here.
Okay. This looks like it's in the same wheelhouse as of the other reliability issues.
That's the other one that we talked about earlier. That's the work from Ed.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's also pending a SIG node review and approval. So if you can assign someone, so I assigned the people I know. So, but if you want, you can assign someone else.
I will assign Sergey, and if he doesn't want to do it, he can find somebody else to say no to do it. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
This one we're
It-
iterating on. It's pretty interesting. There's a doc now. I think I haven't listened to the recording from last week, the other meeting, the Asia time zone friendly meeting, but there's a thread on Slack for anybody who's interested. You can find it in the work group channel where we're talking about this. That's for 134. Is this one ready? I haven't I reviewed this one a week or two ago, but I think I need to take another
Yeah.
look. But
Um,
how's it coming, Patrick? Or whoever's working on it.
It's work in progress. It's getting more complete. It certainly is worthwhile reviewing what they have right now. I haven't looked too closely myself, and it does have
Okay.
the same problem. It's mostly about API review at this point because that should be complete. The types.go update is there. If the validation initially was incomplete, it might be more complete now. But it would be good to get an API review done because I don't think we had that for the CAP. And before we ask them to put more effort into fleshing out the type implementation, it would be good to know whether they are actually implementing the right thing.
Okay.
But if we don't get that in soon, it just might have to be the way that we typically do it. Someone has to just to complete the PR, and then as soon as our API reviewers have time, they'll provide feedback.
Okay. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. I think we've gotten through all the things that are currently in the in review column. In the in progress.
I think that's just really us tracking the things that someone is working on. It doesn't these are mostly the issues and things that are not ready for review. So I think if some author of one of these PRs think that his PR is currently listed as in progress and should be under review, just speak out. But I think it's fairly accurate that the things in progress just need feedback from the owner of the issue or the PR before it can move forward.
And then ready, how is ready different than in review? It's
Ready doesn't have an owner. Well, it might have an assignee, but it's not being worked on.
these are issues then, not
Yeah, these are all issues that would be worked on if someone has the time. It's not a priority. It's not targeting 133.
Okay.
Although arguably perhaps this permanent and transient errors should be worked on more urgently. It does have an assignee, but I don't think they have started.
So this falls in again, I think, to the analysis that Laura is working on. All right.
I thought it had an assignee. I think someone had
It does. It has an assignee.
Yeah.
I don't know that I know this person.
Yeah. It sounded like something that could be done with lower priority by someone who is new to it, but then the question really is, will those people then follow through?
Well, let's pull it into that overall reliability discussion.
Yeah, it certainly belongs there.
Yeah.
Roger that.
And then what about these testing things? I mean, those sort of belong there too, don't they? I mean,
the version skew testing is something that that's overall code quality. The version skew testing is kind of something that we have to do manually at the moment, and I would like to automate it. It is assigned to me as a backlog thing. I do have some ideas how to do it.
okay.
I just need to find the time.
Okay. Do we? I guess my point is it a GA blocker in 134?
Perhaps, as well, the CAP asks for version skew testing, and if we don't have it automated, we need to do it manually.
Okay. I'm gonna put this in that same bucket because it's like basically the testing and the reliability issues that need to be resolved to make us comfortable going to GA. And so we'll decide on each of these issues individually, like whether they're blocking or not, or whether there's a mitigation, like you said, manual testing, but at least let's get it in the list. And then we have 2 minutes.
That's
Okay.
that's
So what-
that's
what's
just
this one about?
that's just a reminder for me. I probably can just close it. I
Okay.
just want to have one final look, and
And then we talked about that, and then
that was just really unit testing code coverage in the kubelet. So it might fall under general code quality, kubelet reliability, because I think the code that I think it pointed out some valid gaps, but I don't remember the details.
okay, I'll leave it up to Laura to figure that out. Okay. Awesome. I think that's pretty good. We got through some stuff. Those things that we just tagged here for review, people that are interested, even if you're not like an approver or whatever, it's always valuable to have more people look at code. BG, see a hand.
Hi, I'm a DRA driver developer, and I just got a quick question that so we can generate the CDI manifest in multiple page, like when starting DRA node driver or when bootstrapping node, or even in the page of node prepare resource page. But I'm just not sure that generating CDI manifest in node prepare resource tab is safe, because so after node prepare resource, then Kubelet and container creation CRI message to CRI runtime, and in that moment, CRI runtime should recognize newly created CDI manifest before receiving that container creation request. But I just feel that nothing guaranteed there will be no race conditions between them. So I just want to hear some ideas or opinion about whether generating CDI manifest in node prepare resource page is safe or not. So since NVIDIA is generating CDI manifest in those page, but I'm just really not sure it is safe or not.
The E2E tests are doing that, and they are running.
Oh.
So the E2E test
Mhm.
driver, the one that is in tree, creates CDI files on the fly, and the tests are stable. But you are right, there is a concern. My naive expectation, without having looked at the CDI helper code, is that it relies on file system notifications, but it also, I think, should have, and I don't know if it does. That's what I'm saying it should have a fallback mode where if it's asked to load or to provide information about a certain CDI device and it's not in the current cache, that it then looks at the file system again and to see whether it has missed anything. And perhaps add, whether such a code path exists. If it doesn't, then we might have to add it to a CDI before we call it 1.0. I don't know what the current state is there.
I think it exists. At least Containerd implementation actually runs, like rescans the CDI directories before actually like trying to get the CDI device.
Oh, they do refresh cache before looking for
Yes.
CDI identifier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, awesome. I mean, maybe we need to check cryo as well, but we need document that that's something that should be done, but we are past time. So Jack, if it's quick, let's hear it.
Super quick. So you mentioned, John, 134 is the target for GA. Are there any plans to turn on beta by default to 133?
No,
So-
we can't do that. No. because
Yeah,
it's
we can't
it's-
because the APIs can't be turned on by default.
right. That's a very
Okay, so then-
strict guide. That's a very strict. There's a cap about it. It's an architecture decision in Kubernetes that we don't enable beta APIs.
Okay, cool. So that's just not on the roadmap no matter what.
Yes.
If GA gets kicked back to 135, then the enable by default will be a part of the GA.
Enable by default is tied to GA. Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you.
But, okay, thank you all.
We have some more flexibility. Once the core API is GA, we can turn on feature gates by default. Right now we can't.
Right. It's just because our API group is a beta API group. Once it's a
Yes.
GA API group, then these additional feature gates for these additional flags can be turned on by default.
Which is a bit
Understood.
odd because even extensions of the API then
weird.
can be turned on by default, just not the entire group.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.